Alright, let's go ahead and boot up Resident Evil 45. I'm excited to check this one out. Nope, I'm out. Nope, count me out. What's going on, everyone? James here with another real review, and today we're taking a look at the Netflix series Resident Evil, the live-action adaptation of the popular video game franchise. A huge thank you to Netflix for giving me the chance to watch this early for review, but you can check it out when all 8 episodes drop on Netflix this week, July 14th. And when you do, let me know down below in the comments your thoughts. Guys, let's have a conversation about this one. As you know, the Resident Evil franchise has been, well, it's been adapted many times in movies and in TV, but this time I was at least hopeful based on the trailers and the cast itself, which is led by Ella Balinska, who plays Jade, Tamara Smart, who plays young Jade, Siena Agudong, who plays Billie, and Lance Reddick, who plays Albert Wesker. And of course, I was even more excited after reading the showrunner's notes before hopping into this series. Andrew Dabb is the writer of Supernatural, and he is leading the pack with this one and writing episodes as well. He said, "The games are our backstory. Everything that happens in the games exists in this world." So from that point on, I thought, is this a passion project? Because if it is, it could separate this series from all of the other live-action adaptations that we've seen before. But before we get into my thoughts, guys, and whether I like this or I didn't like this series, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I love talking about movies, TV, and all the news in between. So if you do too, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on the bell, and hit the thumbs up button if you're a Resident Evil fan. And let me know down below which of the games is your favorite. Now, me personally, I've never played them because that intro for this review is accurate. Every time I get to the title screen or like 5 minutes into the game, I get nervous and I chicken out. These games are horrifying. But guys, let's dive into the series here on Netflix and we'll give you a little summary and background info on what to expect. It's the year 2036, 14 years after Joy, a popular medicine and drug, caused so much pain. Jade Wesker now fights for survival in a world overrun by bloodthirsty infected zombies and mind-shattering creatures. In this absolute carnage, Jade is also haunted by her past in New Raccoon City, by her father's chilling connections to the sinister Umbrella Corporation, but mostly by what happened to her sister, Billie. So there are two things happening. They're going to focus on her present and also Jade's past. Now trust me, this show bounces between both very often, but guys, let's get into the positives and what worked in this series, because I do want to remain optimistic, at least for the first 2 or 3 minutes. Like I mentioned earlier, I love the fact that this cast, well, was led by Ella Balinska, because I thought she did a really good job in Elizabeth Banks' Charlie's Angels, a movie that I didn't overall like, but I enjoyed some of the performances. Ella Balinska is also going to star as the lead actress, or lead voice actor I should say, in Forspoken, a game that is now delayed, but I'm so looking forward to that game. So after seeing Ella Balinska cast as Jade, essentially our hero and protagonist of this story, I was really excited. And of course, video game fans are going to understand that, whoa, she's got ties to Albert Wesker, one of the main villains in Resident Evil. Now, see, I know that because I looked it up, but I'm sure you video game fans out there of Resident Evil will understand Albert Wesker is a, well, he's kind of a weasel, isn't he? But Ella Balinska really tries her hardest, and she does deliver the best performance in this show through 8 episodes. But outside of that, you're coming to Resident Evil probably looking for some action and horror, but also the creature designs. And that's something that stood out in a good way for me, because there were some really cool creature designs in this show, especially when we get to the middle of the season and start to see things called lickers. And then there's this other creature in episode 5. It's very brief and it's kind of shown through found footage, but let's just say there's something on someone's back that shouldn't be there. But that's when it at least felt the most like Resident Evil, because it did terrify me to a degree. Heck, they even used a spider, a mutated, infected spider, that scared the living bejesus out of me, because guys, I'm still slightly arachnophobic. So at least from episodes 4 to 5, there was a little bit of a groove there, so in the middle, it gets a little bit better. But guys, I'm not gonna lie to you, and I can't sugarcoat this, that's all I have for the positives. And I hate to say this, but I have to be honest, guys, there are a lot more negatives when it comes to Resident Evil. And let me start off with just saying this. This is one of the worst shows, if not the worst show, that I'm going to see all year long. And sadly, it's another failed live-action adaptation of this video game property. Even though I am not some sort of mega fan of Resident Evil, I at least know what to expect with the games. They're scary, they're terrifying, and very atmospheric. but nothing about this show had any of those characteristics. There's not really a gripping story here, and there's no horror. Honestly, there's a lot of hokey action and dialogue with sloppy directing and writing to boot. So all of those ingredients really just don't make up for a good, enjoyable experience, at least for me. But where do we begin? I guess we start at the top with the pilot episode, because this show gets off to one of the worst starts in recent memory. The pilot episode doesn't do much to set up a very captivating story. There's some foundation being laid, but you don't really get to understand any of our characters before they literally throw you into the action, and sadly every passing episode gets worse. The story becomes really uninteresting, and guys, I can't spoil anything of course, but let's just say after the middle of this show, like by episode 4, the end of episode 4 at least, I started to feel like this was background noise more than anything. It tries to throw curveballs with lots of twists that just fall flat, and events just conveniently happen too often for our characters for me to really think that, well, any of this is actually natural. It almost feels like sometimes they're just doing things by the numbers as well, and that also comes down to the VFX. The visual effects here and the prosthetics in this show, either it's a product of just a really low budget or just, well, they're just not good. I thought a lot of the prosthetics for the zombies in particular, or as they term them in the show, zeros, it was just awful, and even the costuming for our characters really looked poor. I thought that we would maybe get some more inspired costuming here, but instead it does feel like something you just went to the thrift store, got, and then brought on set, including some of our characters wearing just plain suits sometimes that don't really give the villain, for example, any sort of identity, and then you have literal top hats that are being worn, and it just seems like a lot of mismatching when it comes to costuming, and usually that doesn't bother me unless it's super obvious. When it's good, but when costuming is bad in shows, it's really bad. So here, the VFX, prosthetics, costuming, not good. But outside of that, on a technical level, guys, I'm looking towards the acting, because at least that can salvage maybe a bad script or bad story, but unfortunately the acting here wasn't strong either. And when you couple that with the brutal writing, guys, this is just not working for me. So let's begin with Balinska, because yes, she has talent, but it is wasted here, and I thought she was even better in, dare I say, Charlie's Angels. They really try to prop her character up as having the most emotional turns. Her character beats, her story beats in particular, are supposed to be what really draws the audience in. You can tell they're aiming for that, but instead it comes off as very conventional and not very unique to the character of Jade. And they throw us back in the past way too often for me to really feel even connected to the present day Jane. So what gives? And then there's the legendary Lance Reddick. I really like his acting, and I've always been a big fan of his. He's great. But here he's given some of the most generic character development I've seen in TV in quite a while. Nothing is convincing about his performance either, but I think that's mainly the script calling him to do certain things. Especially in episode 5 and 6, you start to learn more about the character of Albert Wesker, and they make him do something, especially I think it's episode 6, that made me scratch my head, because it didn't work for the character and it didn't play to Lance Reddick's strengths. They wrote him to be a very, again, one-dimensional character. I won't tell you whether he's a protagonist or an antagonist, but let's just say that Albert Wesker in the video games is supposed to be some sort of intimidating character, but in the show he has virtually no presence. But that's not all, you guys. That's really nothing compared to the evil corporate bosses in this show that are not only generic, but they're also laughably bad. You have actor Turlo Convery, who plays Mr. Baxter, one of the execs at the Umbrella Corporation that goes out and searches for Jade to bring her in. But guys, Mr. Baxter is one of those characters that every time they come on screen, or they came on screen here in this show, I just laughed. And that's probably not the intention. They even try to give him some one-liners like cool and gross, but it doesn't work. Sometimes what works in video games doesn't translate to a medium like TV, and guys, this is one of those villains that might have worked okay like in the game, but not here. It's just too, I don't know, distracting from everything else. And then you also have Evelyn. She's played by Paola Nunez, who I think does a good job, but not the character. The character itself is just so, one, predictable, but two, not intimidating in the slightest. She plays Albert Wesker's boss, and you would think that maybe, just maybe, they would know how to write for this actor, write for this character even, but they don't. It comes off as very cheap and I don't know, just unnatural. But now I actually want to get outside of the acting and dive into the story structure, because this series consistently plays with time, going into flashback sequences and even present day events to try and paint this story between Jade and her younger sister Billie. But the only thing it accomplishes is taking me out of the show entirely. This was a cool concept, I think, that might have worked better on paper than it did when it was executed in the show, because I understand why some series do this, where they sort of play around with the chronology of events, and that can work sometimes. But here, it's like the show doesn't know whether it wants to be better in the present day or in the past. Sometimes we get episodes that are dedicated solely to past events, and that kind of worked, but every time there was some sort of groove with Jade as an adult, they always snap us back to flashbacks, and I'm like, just stay still, stay in place, let us marinate with what's going on screen. But it never works out that way. And you know what's funny? I actually really like Tamara Smart's performance as young Jade, and even Siena Agudong, who plays Billie, not a terrible performance, but we just don't really get too much time to settle with them. But when we do, it just feels like a jarring shift in tone. This is where I started to notice that the show maybe lacks direction. You know, I just really feel like it didn't know what it wanted to be at this point. And honestly, whether it could have been a coming of age story or if it could have just been a present day zombie shoot 'em up type of deal, you gotta stick and commit to one, but it doesn't do either well. And oftentimes I noticed that the soundtrack and score in Resident Evil stuck out like a sore thumb. The songs that they chose to use really try to appeal to the Gen Zers and the millennial crowd, but they do so and it doesn't work with the tone of the actual show. When you see series like Stranger Things, heck, Stranger Things Season 4 for example, and how they execute their needle drops, and then you look at Resident Evil, it is a stark difference. It's night and day, and it isn't even close. And at times, I thought the show was trying to be a parody of itself, because we were getting some of the most obvious song choices. We had Billie even listening to a Billie Eilish song. I mean, come on guys, what are we doing here? It is just, I don't know, none of the song choices work. It is just so bad. Even one moment, there's a shootout in the prison with Mr. Baxter, and they use a song for his character, I guess his character's hero moment in a way, and it is just awful. It falls flat. And speaking of action, in the middle of action sequences, all logic is seemingly thrown out of the window, you guys. These are some of the dumbest decisions I've seen made by characters in shows, but you know what? I'm willing to always excuse that usually, because in shows, sometimes that's the intention of the scene. It's what the script calls for, and that's fine. But I don't like when shows establish logic and don't play by the rules that they establish. What hurts one character doesn't hurt another, and what one character is supposed to do is not the same set of rules that the other character has to follow. It's a lot of contradiction, and it makes me scratch my head, because this shouldn't be taken as seriously as it is, but the show tries to create these complex set of rules that no one really follows. Maybe your average viewer won't pick up on that, but man, I had my mind blown, and not in a good way, by how these rules just weren't applied across the board. It just breaks a lot of immersion in this show. And one more thought before we get into my overall score, guys. I had one question coming into this. Will Resident Evil on Netflix at least break the curse of live action video game adaptations, or will it even help the cause? And the answer is no, sadly. I had some hopes for this show, but guys, Resident Evil on Netflix just does not work. It doesn't work in this medium, and I honestly think they need to stop trying if this is the result we're going to get. Movies like Sonic and Sonic 2, that has been pushing the genre forward a little bit more, because that, at least to me, those are quality adaptations of a video game series. But with Resident Evil, it seems like every subsequent film outside of the first one is just so bad. So overall, you guys, Resident Evil really does feel like a generic weeknight cable show with zombies and the Resident Evil name slapped on top. This is yet again another bottom tier adaptation of a video game franchise or property, and it just proves, again, that no one can get Resident Evil right for the big screen. Now, is all of this awful? Well, no. Again, I like at least Ella Balinska trying her hardest, and there are some cool creature designs, and at least there's a bit of a foundation in the first half of this show, and maybe a little bit of a groove in the middle. But guys, overall, I cannot recommend this to you. It's so sad to say that because I hate dogging on anything, but 8 episodes in and I just don't want a season 2. I don't think I ever want this franchise to be adapted ever again. This wasn't really something that I feel like was worth all of the 8 hours maybe that I had spent. You would think that in 8 hours you would get some semblance of character development, but we don't even get that. With bad direction, writing, VFX, a soundtrack that doesn't fit, and even a lack of horror, Resident Evil is basically a forgettable season of television. So if I even had to grade this, it'd probably be like a 1 out of 5. A 1 for Ella Balinska. That's about it, guys. But there you have it. That is my real review of, well, I'm guessing the first and final season of Resident Evil on Netflix. Let me know down below in the comments what you guys think of it. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Or are you kind of in the middle? And again, let me know which Resident Evil game is your favorite, and if you think they should continue to adapt this franchise in a live action format, because I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say. And hey, if you love this review, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on the bell, and hit the thumbs up button. I was thinking of doing a character ranking list for this show, but after watching 8 episodes, I just don't think I can bring myself to doing it. But let's continue to have that conversation down below in the comments. Alrighty, y'all. Well, you know what? Maybe I should go ahead and give Resident Evil a try. Do I start with 1? Do I start with 2? Do I just hop right into Resident Evil 45? I'm kidding. I know there's only like 8 games out, right? Only 8. Alrighty, y'all. Again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening.